When the right wing has policy, and then they put on slogans until they find one that sticks. They don't develop slogans and then stick to the slogan and then have no policy. Which unfortunately is the way the left currently functions in America. Right? Like, we should be developing our policies and then trying slogans to find one that people fuck with to represent that policy. Like, for example, instead of saying we need to do an estate tax cut, who has an estate? A rich person. They made it the death tax. The policy is cut estate taxes. They kept coming up with different slogans until they found one that kind of resonated. And like, ultimately, that's maturation of a political movement. So, all in all, I would say Fran did great. The only thing I would say is, like, a lot of people on the left in America, they are, and it's something that I've been underlining a lot because I want you guys to see it. Social media influencer brand, which is about brand building for the individual speaking. The individual speaking wants you to think of them as the most left wing as opposed to having any responsibility toward anyone else but themselves. That's what you should ask yourself. When this person is speaking, do they have a response? First of all, are they anonymous? That's number one. Who are they? Two, if they're anonymous and they're telling us to do something unpopular, fuck them. They don't matter. Nurse here, thank you for keeping me sane while I throw pills at these Fox News watching patients every morning. Just block Fox News on every TV. You'll be like, oh, sorry, I don't think we have that channel. Somebody said the stock market. Oh, okay. Anyway, so I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the Korean stock market is crashing. It's been crashing for like a month now. How's it doing today? Oh, it's down another 6% today. Yeah, there was a bubble, but now, there was a big run-up, but now it's all giving back. As you can see. But for the last, I want to say 3 months or so, it's been crashing. And part of the reason why is, I don't know if you guys saw this, but China has cracked ultraviolet lithography. China has developed a technology that they said last year would take 15 years to develop. They've delivered in 18 months.
ASMR can do, because it's incredibly complex. And it's why hasn't a Chinese company done what ASMR can do? Because it's incredibly complex. And it's no different with this story as well. If we look at the details of the report, firstly, the scale was important. The information reporting that the unnamed Chinese company is looking to produce about 5 of these machines this year to ramp up to 20 next year, and that is going to go to China's leading chip makers. In comparison, 130 DUV immersion machines are expected to come out of ASML this year, with a 30% increase next year and a 30% increase out of the manufacturer. Now, yield is focused on so heavily by the likes of TSMC, Samsung, and others when they're producing these chips because they want no wastage, they want the max amount of usable chips. The question is, are the DUV machines that are coming out of China good enough to create the yields that these chip makers are requiring and at least near or on par with ASML? Finally, is this a big threat to ASML? Right now, I'd say in the short term, no. The reason being is some of these immersion DUV machines are already export controlled by various restrictions from the US and the Netherlands for ASML. So they can't ship some of these anyway. So the machines China is producing are going to probably go to the Chinese fabs out there, the foundries, the manufacturers. So there's not a massive loss here right now for ASML because those machines are just being sent to the Chinese fabs. So they're already supplied.
So one of the things that's interesting is about, when was this? A couple of years ago, back in December 2024, ASML CEO says China is 18 months ago, is 10 to 15 years behind in chip making capabilities. It's well known that even in the best-in-class DUV tools, Chinese fab SMIC will be unable to match TSMC's process technologies cost effectively. This is because Chinese companies cannot access leading-edge EUV lithography tools. By banning the export of EUV, China will lag 10 to 15 years behind the West. ASML has never shipped its EUV tools to China due to the Wassenaar arrangement, despite SMIC's reported order for one EUV machine. The details remain unclear, but ASML did not deliver the machine to the Chinese foundry due to US sanctions. Having understood that EUV tools are not coming to China, Huawei and its partners have explored extreme ultraviolet lithography themselves with the aim of building their own lithography chip-making tools and ecosystem, which will take 10 to 15 years at best. Oops.
Not a bad day to be a Chinese chip maker. Shares of CXMT soaring over 500% right now on market debut. This is Asia's biggest IPO for 2026, and it is already China's biggest listed firm. Our China reporter Elaine Yu has been keeping track of all of the action this morning. She joins us now with more. Elaine, a huge pop here. Walk us through it.
That's right. This is a blockbuster debut for CXMT. This is China's largest and state-backed DRAM producer. It surged more than 470% at the open in the first few minutes, and now it's up more than 530%. That's lifting its market cap to more than $480 billion, even in the opening minutes, and making it the most valuable listed company by market cap. And this rally has been a reflection of a build-up of investor demand. We've had investors selling their existing tech stocks to take part in this offering, but also because there's a limited public float. Only 6.7% is freely tradable. And then you have that scarcity premium that is benefiting this company too, as the only pure-play memory company in China that's listed right now. And I was talking to Theodore Shou of PE Capital earlier today. He said right now this listing in the short term is driven by sentiments and this momentum we're seeing, but he did say that over time it will gradually fall back in line with the broader market. And here's what he had to say about his longer term outlook.
I have no doubt the company is going to grow to be a global leader. It's maybe just a question of time that it can be not only a challenger, it can really be a global champion in this particular sector. We have seen the same stories with other similar sectors in the past. I do think as a business, these memory chip businesses are sustainable, but the great margins that we're seeing today, the net profitability that we're seeing today are not sustainable. You have to kind of normalize them over a cycle. We are right at the peak, not necessarily for share price, but at the peak of demand and supply imbalance, right? There's a significant over demand than supply. And that imbalance is leading to this great margin that everyone in the market is enjoying. That is not sustainable. That will ultimately come down. And as I said, those are cyclical industries, so they will come down.
And given the cycle, he said that for the survivors, those who can weather these storms will become stronger, emerge the other end stronger. Dan?
Elaine, how has the government supported the company's rise, and how much pricing power does it have now? This is not necessarily like for like with the US or European firm, right?
That's right, and in fact, its rise, the company's rise, has been powered by state backing. It's been crucial to its development in the last 10 years. State investors now hold roughly half of the company, and it's really gained pricing power at home as well. Reuters has reported that CXMT has repeatedly hiked prices even for Huawei and rejected its requests for relief, and Reuters has also reported that it's been selective with customers, in some cases charging even more than its South Korean rivals. So it shows that the company has real commercial leverage that's growing here, but as you say, there are major challenges still, especially with the export controls led by the US that is blocking its access to the most advanced lithography machine. So the real longer-term test will be whether CXMT
weeks later they were a problem. But this was all promulgated by you. We had the workers in the the meat factories. They were essential. They had to keep working. Most of them got COVID. They got it in the first couple of weeks. Most of them were younger. The reassurance should have come from public health. The reassurance should have said, congratulations, you've recovered. It also should be acknowledged. What's the number one thing we can do if we get another pandemic? Before we have a vaccine, before we have monoclonal antibodies, it would be to utilize natural immunity. So instead of the advice you were giving to Cuomo and others in New York that led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people or tens of thousands of people, you could have been saying, well, maybe the nurses taking care of the elderly should be people who are 2 weeks out from COVID infection. We could have used natural immunity as somewhat of a block of protection. Imperfect, but the only protection we had and the only thing we could have done. Instead, the nursing homes were seated with people who had COVID. So I think the discussion of natural immunity is one where there wasn't sufficient honesty, humility, there wasn't enough presentation to encourage people. That was the only encouraging thing we had for a while is you've got it, you're very, very, if not impossible, close to impossible chance that you'll die if you get it again. Everybody could have been reassured. Nobody was reassured. It's like, well, we don't know. We just don't quite understand natural immunity. My favorite quote from that is from Martin Kulldorff from Harvard. You called him one of the people you had to take down, the fringe epidemiologist, which I've never ever heard a scientist call another scientist that. But he jokingly said on Twitter, he said, yeah, we knew about natural immunity from 486 BC, from the time of the Athenian plague. We lost all knowledge of it in 2020. The good news is it's slowly coming back. 24 to 2025, we're beginning to understand what natural immunity is again. Not something perfect, but a useful tool that could have been used, but also something that could have helped people by telling the public, my goodness, you're not going to die now. You have a chance. If you've already had it, you're 85 years old, you're at risk for it, you're wanting to feed your wife, and they're telling you to wear 4 masks and not be around your wife when you've already had it, it made no sense. I visited with a man whose mom was 83 and she was dying from COVID. They go to the hospital in Orange County. They won't admit her to the hospital till she's vaccinated because we have a policy that everybody in the hospital must be vaccinated. She's got COVID and they wanted to vaccinate her again. At one point in time, the CDC understood this. They told people, don't get vaccinated if you've had COVID within 3 months. Why? Because it may give you a heightened immune response when you've already got a heightened immune response. But giving a person very sick, and many of the people who died from COVID died from sort of this storm of response, this immune storm. The answer wouldn't be try to stir up their immune response more by giving them a vaccine. The answer was actually steroids, and good old-fashioned steroids, 37% reduction in death. It turned out to be way more valuable than remdesivir, way more valuable than any of the other treatments, but I don't remember ever hearing a complimentary word on natural immunity or steroids or anything else. And, you know, I wish we could have done more today. I would have been willing to accept an apology today. I'm sorry, I made mistakes. We all made mistakes, and at the time, I thought the gain of function research was, the risks of it were worth the benefits. But I've reassessed since 15 million people died. People say, well, gosh, these things never happen. We know it happened in 1977. We know with 100% certainty a virus escaped. In 1977, there's something called the Russian flu. Nobody's exactly positive how it got out. When they sequenced it, they found out that a flu in 1977 had exactly the same RNA as a 1954 one that they had in the lab and they had created a vaccine for. In fact, turns out anybody born before 1954 was immune, and the only people who got it were people who were born between 1954 and 1977. But it was identical. The genetic sequence was identical to this vaccine or the virus from 1954, and that doesn't happen because these respiratory viruses are always mutating. To be identical means it had to have leaked from the lab, proof positive that it had. So we know this happens. An author by the name of Young wrote a book and said there was 1,200 cases of significant accidents that have occurred. We knew all of this, and yet it was completely discounted because I think you were worried that if it was seen that you funded dangerous research that started the pandemic, you'd get blamed. And it was a concerted effort. It wasn't just you. Anybody associated with the funding decided we needed to protect ourselves. Senator Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that we lost knowledge of natural immunity. I didn't. Dr. Fauci did. I supposedly had an asymptomatic case of COVID because of the very faulty PCR test. I never got vaccinated or injected. There's no way I would have done that because I found out enough about the mRNA gene therapy. But you also brought up the issue of hospital protocols. I'm going to be holding a public event on hospital protocols. We've already received a couple hundred testimonies. They are heart-wrenching. They are heart-wrenching. Here's an excerpt from the testimony of a staff surgeon, very experienced, doctor for decades, at Providence Regional Medical Center, Everett, Washington. Quote, after our hospital was given remdesivir by the CDC, we were provided misleading/inaccurate information about the drug by our medical leadership. When I had a young trauma patient who was a perfect candidate for remdesivir, the infectious disease doctor on call told me to not give it to her because, quote, she seemed like a nice girl. He concludes it was known early the remdesivir kills. As I said, nurses referred to it as run, death is near. So again, I've always been, I was never made sense to me that we put all of our eggs in the experimental gene therapy. If you knew anything about it, you would have avoided it like a plague. And we didn't. We sabotaged early treatment. But the only treatment we really approved, monoclonal antibodies, which I think basically worked pretty well, but those weren't particularly available. They were denied an awful lot of patients. It was all remdesivir, based on a study that the NIH changed the endpoint from mortality, because it had no impact on mortality, to days recovery. A drug that the WHO recommended against its use in COVID in November 2020, but a drug that cost over $3,000 for a course of treatment, versus things like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, who even Dr. Fauci, and I should have got that one out because I want to take this time to end things on the record, said you need to have a very tight protocol on remdesivir because it's unknown, but hydroxychloroquine, that's approved, some side effects, but we have a long history of it. Let's put up my latest chart. Again, I was tracking adverse events on the experimental injection, but I use this chart as a comparison. So you've got ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. These are average, again, AVAIRS doesn't prove causation, but there's correlation. It's there for safety signals. So ivermectin, over 30 years of FDA reports, 17 deaths per year. Hydroxychloroquine, over 38 years of reporting, 142 deaths per year. Remdesivir, over 5.5 years, 546 deaths per year. The COVID injection, almost 7,000 deaths per year. Which is safest? What did the FDA freak us out about ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, when they turned a complete blind's eye during the injection's injury? So I want to enter the quote from the surgeon. By the way, here's the answer. Cheryl Atkinson in an interview said that when it comes to money, we check financial ties among experts on the government panel devising coronavirus treatment guidelines, which had the effect of dialing back hydroxychloroquine use and giving an edge to remdesivir. We found the 11 members reporting links to a drug company, 9 of them named relationships to our investigators maker Gilead. 7 more, including 2 of the committee leaders, have ties to Gilead beyond the 11 months they had disclosed. 2 are on Gilead's advisory board, others were paid consultants who received research support and honoraria. By the way, within the study, I think one of the study participants was an employee of Gilead. A bunch also had conflicts with Gilead. So, gee, I wonder why. You know, there are conflicts of interest. Gilead made billions of dollars off of remdesivir and people died. In terms of ignoring safety signals, we'll probably put that down now. This has come to light. This is Dr. Drew Weissman, who got the Nobel Prize for the mRNA platform. He wrote to Dr. Fauci on February 8th of 2020. Tony, I wanted to alert you to some new data we generated with our mRNA LNP vaccine. It was a higher fold dose, but that mRNA LNP go to the placenta and fetus, measured by translation of the mRNA and cause of immune response to the amniotic fluid. So that same day, Dr. Fauci responds, it'd be interesting to see what human dose levels given intramuscular do. So about a month later, Dr. Weissman replies and said, we still have some concerns over the data after they tested it IM. Now, again, there's more documentation in terms of the FDA blew it off. It's like, don't worry about that. That was the whole thing. That's what Peter Marks did when he was showing that his algorithm was going to mask safety signals. The last thing I want to enter into the record here is, and I want to make the point, you know, why is this important? That they buried the treatment of severely injection injured. The fact that we haven't acknowledged these injection injuries, these people can't get treatment. They're being gaslit by their doctors. So it's all in your head. The rate of the injection injured of suicides is increasing because they've given up hope. Because our medical establishment and federal health agencies completely failing to acknowledge it. So again, Dr. Nath was diagnosing and treating injection injured in March of 2021. This concerned people. So you got Dr. Walter Koroshitz, writes Dr. Fauci. One of the points he made, there's been a steady, slow stream of reports to me of post-vaccination neurological conditions. Dr. Nath has been collecting a bunch. He has reports sent out to publish. Well, that alarmed everybody. Boy, you can't let the public know what's actually happening. You can't actually let the public know what the science is showing. So on April 29th, a email from Francis Collins, head of NIH, to Dr. Koroshitz, says, I find this approach troubling and will have the main consequence of feeding vaccine hesitancy and social media overreaction. Then Dr. Lawrence Tabak writes to Francis Collins, I don't understand why Walter does not shut this thing down. Why don't you shut down Dr. Nath, who's actually treating injection injured? Why? Because of vaccine hesitancy. And because we haven't acknowledged that, and the reason I've been advocating for this is because I know the injection injured. I know people who lost loved ones within days of the injection. And we've turned our backs on them. They deserve acknowledgement. They deserve to be heard, seen, and believed so they can get treatment. I also know the doctors whose careers were destroyed because you denigrated things like ivermectin and denied ivermectin to people in hospitals who got their kidneys knocked out by the remdesivir, got put on ventilators, never got to hug their loved ones goodbye because of those hospital protocols. That's what your science did to people. So, Dr. Fauci, my only question is, based on your lack of testimony here today, based quite honestly on our investigation into the cover-up of safety signals and injection injuries, we've issued letters to a number of former FDA officials to come in for transcribed interviews. You'll be getting a letter today asking for a volunteer transcribed interview. So I'd be asking, will you comply or will I have to subpoena you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Expect a subpoena. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Dr. Fauci, did you personally receive any royalty payments connected to COVID-related intellectual property?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Given that NIH receives royalty payments from certain pharmaceutical companies, why would any American believe these financial ties did not influence decisions about which treatments were promoted or restricted?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Why doesn't NIAID publicly disclose these payments?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did you partner with Bill Gates on global health initiatives or vaccines?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
How much did Bill Gates' entities provide funding to NIAID collectively since 2005?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
To your knowledge, did Bill Gates partner with China on sensitive research?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Specifically, dual-use research such as countermeasures or gain-of-function?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
You know if Bill Gates' entities partnered with U.S. government classified programs?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
You know if Bill Gates maintains an active national security clearance?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did you advocate or request for Bill Gates to receive a security clearance?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Do you have any knowledge that NIAID or NIH through HHS sponsored or requested a security clearance for Bill Gates?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Around 2010, my understanding is that the government shifted its approach to biodefense countermeasure research. Did NIAID, under your leadership, partner with the Obama White House or any other U.S. government classified entities on sensitive countermeasures research?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did your office take steps to drive biological research investments?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What was private industry's take on the type of research in the 2010 timeframe and before?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Was it considered too dangerous to conduct, and industry was hesitant to take this on and invest in?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Why did you take steps to mature the government's approach to biodefense?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Were there any specific lines of effort or actions you felt were needed during this time to improve the research development and fielding model?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
How was dual use and gain of function incorporated or accounted for in maturing biodefense countermeasures?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did you ever discuss moving gain of function countermeasures research out of government space to private industry space?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
How were these private organizations regulated through government oversight while conducting risky research, including gain of function or gene editing technology?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did the Obama White House or any government entities take steps to inject funding into private industry?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
How do you ensure that our national security and public health is protected when private organizations work with foreign countries of concern and have the no government oversight, such as the Eco Health Alliance research grant you funded in a CCP military lab?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did given the culture of the pay to play NIAID, did you or anyone act on your behalf, make any payment or enter any arrangement in any way or fashion to secure influence the broad pardon you received from President Biden?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the Department of Energy that confirms during Anthony Fauci's tenure that Bill Gates was given Q security clearance from 2014 to 2021 without objection. That will be entered into the record. But also ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the contents of the folder of authorities provided to Dr. Fauci, including the pardon. Let's be clear today, what we've seen. I really did want to hear from Dr. Fauci. I wanted to hear perhaps an apology, perhaps some semblance of being sorry for what happened or that judgment errors were made. We didn't hear any of that. But he was subpoenaed here to testify, refused to answer any questions, even after being directed by the chair and being advised of the law requiring him to do so. He has cited a privilege that is unsupported because of his blanket pardon and because he waived the privilege by testifying at the start. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to comply with the law, limited to the period of your pardon. At any point between January 1st, 2014 and January 19th, 2025, did you destroy any federal record or tell anyone else to?
Under the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Given that you have a unlimited presidential pardon, what is your specific objection that you are making?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
My question was limited to the period of your pardon only. I find your objection unsupported and direct you to answer the question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Because you refuse to answer, citing a privilege that is unsupported because of your pardon, and after being denied to do so, this committee has scheduled a vote next week on a resolution certifying your contempt. I think we have another question or two from Senator Langford.
Chairman, really this is a question for you, and it's a question to try to figure out how do we get a good answer on this? Because clearly Dr. Fauci's attorneys are saying that he has a Fifth Amendment right. We've also subpoenaed him to be able to compel his testimony to be able to be here. I happen to be in the committee. We're also dealing with Lois Lerner. Lois Lerner came and testified, gave an opening statement, and then took the Fifth Amendment. The committee then held her in contempt for that, saying you can't do both. You can't both testify and say I'm not going to answer questions. So the parliamentary question that I think we've got to be able to deal with is this consistent with Lois Lerner? What she also did when she came before Congress, gave an opening statement, testimony, so made a statement, and then refused to answer questions. Are we dealing with the same issue here where someone is you can't make a statement and say I'm not going to make statements at the same time?
I think it's a very good question. I think that's something all of us will examine over next week. We're going to have a vote next week on contempt. I think there's another legal question that the courts may have to decide upon, and that is whether or not a presidential pardon that offers you complete immunity, that you can still claim that you need protection from immunity when you've been protected. Because Dr. Fauci isn't liable for anything as long as he tells the truth, even if he admits that he destroyed records on a routine basis. His assistant said she destroyed a ton of emails. I think it was a routine thing. I think he destroyed throughout his career there probably thousands of emails. Even if he did that, as long as he answered truthfully, yes, I did. I didn't think that was important. I made a mistake. You can't be prosecuted for it. Many of the things are outside the statute of limitations as well. All he had to do today, if he wanted to testify, was be honest. As long as he was honest, even about committing a crime, he would have no jeopardy. But I think the pardon has given him more immunity than most people would ever get. If you offer a witness immunity in exchange for testimony, he has blanket immunity. The president gave him blanket immunity for virtually anything he could have possibly done, while at NIH. So I think we all have to individually answer this question. We welcome you to be part of helping us figure out the question, but there will be a vote, at least right now, we plan to be a vote next week on contempt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Today will be the capstone to Anthony Fauci's 40 years of abuse of power at NIH. In the end, must imagine Fauci believes he got away with it. But still, late at night, even the guilty must become anxious rerunning the scenarios through his mind, wondering, latching on to lingering doubts, and worrying. Did his actions lead to the largest man-made plague in human history? Are the millions dead the result of his experiments or experiments that he approved that increased the pathogenicity of deadly viruses? History will judge, but the facts, as we now know them, paint a sordid tale of dishonesty, misjudgment, and ultimately the hubris, the likes of which the world has rarely seen. If everyone will remain seated for a few minutes, we're going to let Dr. Fauci exit. Thank you.
All right, so it does appear as though this hearing is now over, as we are seeing Dr. Anthony Fauci leaving the hearing room, and this is a live look right here as we transition from outside. You can see the cameras are getting ready as Dr. Fauci is now exiting. Let's raise the audio.
Mr. Fauci, what do you say about these accusations against you?
Dr. Fauci, why don't you answer any questions? What do you think about being held in contempt of Congress? Do you know how many times you would hope with this?
All right, so Dr. Fauci, not surprisingly, not answering any of the questions there from reporters after he invoked the Fifth Amendment at this COVID-19 hearing. And every single question that he was asked from both Republicans and Democrats, he invoked the Fifth Amendment. So we're going to continue to see Dr. Senator Rand Paul. Let's listen.
Actual vote, it's already been scheduled for next week for a vote on contempt of Congress, referral of contempt of Congress. If the vote is affirmative,